These two F-16s are identical in size, they're almost identical in price, and they fly similar too, who'da thunk it? But which one is right for you? Hey there, I'm John, this is Two Brothers RC, and this is a tiered ranking of the E-flite 80 F-16 versus the new Freewing 90 F-16. Now, I'd like to think that an F-16 is an F-16, but no, I am totally wrong. Even similar planforms can behave very differently depending on the airfoil shape, available thrust, and so forth. It's a very complex subject that I'm just gonna go ahead and reduce down to one jet good, one jet great. To properly rank any two planes, you need a scoring system, and you need an opinionated ass who doesn't have an issue with speaking his mind. Now that we have two of those things on this channel, we'll go ahead and compare both of these jets on their ease of flying, agility, high alpha, takeoffs, landings, flight time, and ease of modification. Let's kick this review off by comparing ease of flying. Between the two jets, the 80 is lighter than the 90. This is the only time that you're going to hear me talking about cubic wing loading. On its own, it's pretty much useless for talking about how an airplane flies. If you're going to compare two different aircraft, you have to compare their planform, which is their overall shape, their control surfaces, the airfoil that they're using, their construction, the thrust that they're producing, and the servo quality. It's a huge puzzle that just can't be reduced down to lighter wing load is better. Trying to explain a plane's performance by wing loading is like saying a Formula 1 race car goes fast because it's lighter than your Toyota Corolla is. While amusing to think about, that's not really painting a full picture of the differences, is it? Comparing two different planforms is useless when you're only talking about cubic wing load. These two jets are identical in size and planform though. That makes the cubic load worth mentioning here. Now, the cubic load for the 90 is 21.63, while the 80 is 18.47 on this completely arbitrary scale you see in front of you. But those numbers only work if you're flying the 80 on SMC 6S 4400 packs, and the 90 on SMC 6S 5900 packs. The 80 will be easier to fly throughout a variety of maneuvers using an identical setup between both aircraft, but the difference is hardly noticeable unless you're pushing these two planes to the edge of their performance envelope. We'll go ahead and cover that in the agility section coming up. In regular aerobatic and sport flying, you won't really notice any difficulty flying them at all. Where you will run into issues is their tendency to experience accelerated stalls. Aircraft can stall at any airspeed, and all it takes to stall a plane is aggressive elevator input, or in our case, flying them neutral or even slightly tail-heavy, because you can exceed critical angle of attack with level stabilators on a jet that's unstable, which is why we always recommend flying them with a rate gyro that's been tuned properly. Not only is it scale, it's also flyable. The 90 is slightly less forgiving than the 80 when it stalls, but neither one is really so different that you'll struggle to fly either one of them here. If you can fly one of these jets, you can fly both of them. Oh, and before you say that, well, of course the heavier battery on the 90 is going to make it heavier overall, you're right. But the 90 is also 3,170 grams, while the 80 is 2,727 grams. This is empty weight before you add a pack. To get the 80 to match the center of gravity of the 90, I have to run a lighter pack, and 90mm jets do require bigger packs to avoid damaging the battery under flight loads, while 80mm jets can generally get away with lighter batteries. For now, let's go ahead and reduce this very complex subject down to the 80mm getting an A in ease of flying, and the 90mm also getting an A. Agility is always a top concern of mine. I don't want to fly a nose-heavy plane with limited throws. I want my fighter jet to fly like a fighter jet, not a Cessna shaped like an F-16. Fortunately, both of these jets are highly agile, but one of them is more agile than the other. The 80 F-16 can do everything that the 90 can do, just not as good. Compare backflips. The 80 can backflip, but it can't maintain inertia through the loop. The 90 can backflip with the best of them. What about flat spins? The 80 can do a falling leaf. The 90 can do a proper flat spin. The 80 does a better knife edge pass. but the 90 is pretty close. Both of them do really nice cobra maneuvers.
One. Wow.
Neither of them really does the cobra spin, kind of a feature or lack thereof on the F-16. Both of these jets are highly agile, and it's not that hard to stall them while maneuvering if you're flying them the way that mine are set up. This is where piloting skill comes in, regardless of whether you're using a gyro. You can put the best gyro into a plane, but without an angle of attack limiter, it won't stop you from crashing. In fact, having a gyro and exceeding critical angle of attack means that you're going to stall harder as the gyro tries to compensate for what it thinks is an abnormal flight situation. The biggest difference between these two jets is thrust, pure thrust. The 80 can't compare in stock form, and the version you're seeing now uses a thrust tube donated by Chuck the Modfather on Discord. This gets it to about 70 to 80% of the thrust that the 90 has out of the box. And vertical climbouts are where you really notice the thrust difference. Meanwhile, the 90 flies amazing on a 6-cell setup, and all bets are off on the 8-cell system with nearly unlimited vertical. The 90 gets an S, while the 80 gets an A. If it has wings, I'll make it high alpha, or it's gonna die trying. Both of these jets perform fantastic high alpha passes. Upright is dramatic with a commanding presence in the sky. Both motors make incredible sound while passing by, and both are very stable until you begin to stall the vertical stabilizer. As I showed in the final F-22 review from last week, once clean airflow ceases over the vertical tail, it doesn't take long for the high-energy vortices being formed off the leading edge extensions to bleed off. Once that happens, the tail stops providing lateral stability. This high alpha pass looked great up until it began to depart from controlled flight. If you're flying on my Elevon setup from the F-16 90mm video, it's pretty easy to arrest the departure with aileron input, then push the nose down and continue steering with rudder, and maybe clean the Tootsie Roll out of your boxers. Don't get the nose up too high, or every jet that can perform a high alpha pass will do this, unless you have thrust vectoring, in which case you can just ignore the laws of physics. This issue goes away entirely when you do an inverted high alpha pass. The vertical tail is always in clean airflow. You just steer around with rudder like normal, but having high gyro gains is critical to maintaining stability in this maneuver, and even the gyro won't save you if you're not providing the right inputs. It's a tricky game to play, with the only prize being your self-esteem or cool clips to post to social media. If you can do this, it's f***ing awesome, and the best way to enter it is through a waterfall, because you'll bleed off airspeed instantly and you can focus on getting the jet down low, rather than fighting it to ditch excessive airspeed and stop climbing. Both jets will do this maneuver, but the 80 is actually a little more stable during an inverted pass. Both jets earn an S rank here, with a slight edge to the 80 if I had to break down the score a little more, maybe S+. High alpha isn't the only thing that these two jets excel at, but it is one of the areas where they're almost the same. That is to be expected when you're flying a cropped delta planform with nearly identical control surfaces and a similar wing load. But we're getting close to the point where the scores begin to differ. In takeoffs, the 90 is a better jet. It takes less time to rotate, it doesn't nearly require as much throttle to rotate, and it generally tracks better on the ground, even without the nosewheel gyro that the 80mm has. In order to use the air brakes, I had to give up the nosewheel gyro in the 90, yet the 80 is still a little squirrely on the ground compared to it. With flaperons dropped the way I recommend taking off with both jets, the 90 uses less runway, it lifts up more gracefully, and it just looks better to me. The 90 gets an S while the 80 gets an A. Landing, however, is a different situation. The 80 has beautiful scale gear like the 90 does, yet setting up the 80 to use flaperons like the full-scale jet results in it feeling like it's balancing over the wing on a shower rod, rather than floating in gracefully like you'd expect an Air Force jet to be able to do. The 90 has no pitch instability issues with flaperons dropped, again, provided that you're stabilizing an intentionally unstable center of gravity with AS3X+, but the 80 just feels kinda weird the entire time. Is it flyable? Sure. Do you need flaperons? Nope. Both jets land without them, but they land slower and more controllably with a shallow angle of attack rather than risking a tail strike with a high alpha landing without flaps. The 80 gets a B here, while the 90 gets an S. Flight time on both of these jets is actually pretty damned good. You would think to yourself that the 4400 battery I'm using in the 80 would result in a lot less flight time than the 90, but that's not the case. The 80 is less heavy and it requires less thrust to fly. And both the 80 and 90 have an aft center of gravity on my setup, which means that I need neutral to slightly down trim on the stabilators. This reduces drag and makes the jets fly longer. Also, as mentioned before, the 80 is using a thrust tube, which correctly sizes the exhaust nozzle so that it requires less throttle to fly in general. On the 80, you can reasonably expect 3 to 4 minute flights on SMC 4400 batteries. On the 90, you can expect an average of 3.5 to 4.5 minutes on SMC 5900 HV batteries. If you're flying reasonably and you're not trying to figure out how fast a plane can go with a GPS or a radar gun for whatever reason, you can add a minute to the average on both jets. Flying with voltage telemetry will tell you exactly when to come in. If you're at half throttle and you're hearing 22 volts under load, it's time to start preparing to land. The 90 gets an A and the 80 gets a B. Comparing the final tier, both of these jets use upgraded stab servos, which is an identical mod between them. AGF servos on the 80, high-techs on the 90. The 80 uses a thrust tube to fix the fan swept area of the exhaust to give it some decent thrust, while the 90 uses a battery tray mod to shift the center of gravity further aft. The 80 doesn't need mods to get an aft center of gravity, which is where I prefer it to be, but the 90 does need the tray mod to get it to balance where a fighter jet should. On both of these jets, you're looking for about 40mm behind the factory recommendations to fly like a fighter, but you do need a gyro to stabilize the jet because you're in tail-heavy territory there. It's unsafe and it's not scaled to fly jets like that, so keep the center of gravity closer to the factory marks if you go without a gyro. But unfortunately that's Cessna Town, so no thanks from me. Neither jet really needs much besides upgraded stab servos, better wheels, a nozzle for the 80, and a tray mod for the 90. They both get an S in ease of modification. Now you might look at this chart and think that you see a clear winner, so let's go ahead and keep a couple of things in mind. This is what I personally feel about both jets, having flown both of them and having spent money on both of them. Your airspeed may vary. Also, this chart doesn't account for price. Remember in the intro when I mentioned that these two jets have a nearly identical price? That's not the full story. E-flite bind and fly jets are called bind and fly because they come with a receiver, which is at least $115 if you're sticking with the Spectrum ecosystem. Which I highly recommend that you do because AS3X Plus is just stupidly good. The E-flite 80 comes with a 6-channel AS3X receiver in the gray version, while the Thunderbird variant comes with an 8-channel receiver. Both of those versions cost $600. Now, the Freewing 90 is plug-and-play, which means that it doesn't come with a receiver and it's priced identically to the bind and flies at $600. You need to tack on the receiver price to the existing cost of the airframe, and this jet does need an 8-channel setup if you want to use the air brake, so an 8360T will currently set you back another $130 for a grand total of $730 for this jet. The E-flite jets are definitely a better value, but I think that you're getting a better performer out of the Freewing jet. In terms of appearance, they both look pretty similar, and you gotta admit the lights on the 90 are pretty much absolutely stunning, and they kinda outclass the 80 by quite a bit. Both of these jets are great birds to own and fly, though I have to admit that I was very wrong about the 90 originally. I thought it was too heavy. I was wrong. It does fly better than the 80 in every way that I personally care about. It's faster, it's more agile, and it's more capable in post-stall maneuvering. The 80 is a good jet, and I do definitely recommend it, especially with the mods and CG that I'm using, but both of these jets need a gyro if you're going to fly like that. Speaking of setup, both the 80 and the 90 use the setup I demonstrated in the 90 review video a few weeks ago. Check that out, linked below, if you'd like to see how to set these birds up to perform, and if you think these kinds of videos are fun and interesting, smash that super thanks button to let us know, and maybe hit the merch shop while you're at it. My oldest kiddo is designing some sick new merch coming up that you guys will totally love, but you can always pick up a Two Brothers sticker or t-shirt too. We really appreciate each and every one of you guys for making this journey through YouTube worthwhile, and we'd love to chat with you on Discord too. Join the Two Brothers server via discord.gg/2brosrc or just hit the link below because it's faster than listening to me and typing it in. See you guys again next week.